Tulsequah is an unincorporated locality in northwestern British Columbia, located at the confluence of the Taku and Tulsequah Rivers. The Tulsequah Chief Mine is nearby, about 10 miles up the Tulsequah River. Aviation in the area began late in the 1920s. In August 1929, a United States Navy loaning OL-8A amphibian called the Juno took off from Juneau, Alaska, and flew up Taku Inlet to the Tulsequah River. Lieutenant Commander Arthur W. Radford then flew 10 miles up the river before returning to Juneau. Radford was Commandant of the Alaskan Aerial Survey Detachment on an aerial photographic mapping survey of southeast Alaska. The rapid increase in prospecting and mining near Tulsequah had drawn the attention of the United States Bureau of Mines at Juneau. In June 1930, Alaska-Washington Airways pilot Bob Ellis left Juneau for Tulsequah in a Lockheed Vega called Taku. Passengers were Inspector William Spiller of the British Columbia Provincial Police, BC Game Warden E. Martin, and E.M. Goddard, who was known as Wynne, of the Alaska Game Commission. They were visiting the Polaris Taku mining camp. The following day, Ellis left early for Tulsequah, where he picked up miner Bill Strong. Strong's wife was seriously ill in Victoria. Ellis flew Strong to Victoria in the Vega, arriving less than 12 hours later. At the end of June 1930, Alaska-Washington Airways pilot Ansel Ekman landed at Tulsequah, leaving a group at Big Bull Slough. In mid-July, the Vega called Ketchikan flew to the mining properties of the Tulsequah mines with a diamond driller from Seattle. This Vega was flown by a new pilot, Floyd Keetle. During the summer of 1929, both the United States and Canada opened customs stations to handle the Tulsequah traffic. The United States station, on a barge at the mouth of the Taku River, opened July 29th. The Canadian station, also on the Taku River near the Tulsequah River, was at Eaton, BC, at the site of the Taku Trading Company store. Canadian Customs gave Alaska-Washington Airways special authority in September 1929 to land its aircraft throughout the Taku mining district. This would facilitate service for the numerous mining camps. Throughout 1930, Alaska-Washington Airways would support the mining and trapping industries at Tulsequah, but competition and the Depression would lead to the company's failure in 1932. The Juneau newspaper reported in June 1932 that 5 flying boats were coming to Juneau from Detroit, then to the Yukon on a prospecting expedition. Thomas M. Mitchell and a group of Detroit investors had formed a gold-seeking expedition to the Yukon. One of the members was James Easton. He had designed and built the Eastman Model E2 Sea Rover flying boat. The expedition was around 5 of these flying boats. The Sea Rovers had left Walkerville, Ontario, late in May 1932, carrying the leaders of the 35-member expedition and as many supplies as could be squeezed aboard. The remaining members traveled by train to Prince Rupert, then by the steamer Princess Nora to Juneau. The advance party had arranged for a shipment of 5,000 gallons of gasoline and supplies to be barged up the Taku River to Tulsequah, where the fuel was held by English trader Bill Strong. After a flight of 3,000 miles, the 5 flying boats reached Juneau on June 11th. The party moved to Tulsequah. From there, men and equipment were shuttled to the operational base at Atlin. The Mitchell Exploration Company's operations were a failure, but 2 of its members, Frank Barr and James Eastman, stayed on in the Cassiar. Eastman eventually was a successful miner. Barr became a respected flyer. The enterprising Englishman Bill Strong had established his trading post at Tulsequah near the junction of the Taku and Tulsequah Rivers, just inside the BC border, 40 miles from Juneau. Strong had spent many years pushing barges loaded with supplies upstream and slogging through muskeg. Having hauled the Mitchell expedition's supplies to his post, he realized the possibilities of air travel after watching the 5 flying boats shuttling back and forth to Atlin on a 1-hour flight, a trip that would have taken him a week. With the failure of the mining expedition, pilot Barr was out of work. Strong decided to put Barr back to work. Strong purchased a 1930 Fokker flying boat from Gorst Air Transport of Seattle. Strong sent Barr to pick it up in the spring of 1933. Barr began flying charters throughout the Cassiar. The aircraft was named City of Atlin, and July 1st, 1933, registered in Canada. It was a tough flying boat with a double aluminum hull, a Pratt & Whitney 525 horsepower Hornet engine, and a 3-blade tractor-type propeller. It carried 9 passengers, or almost 1,500 pounds of freight. Barr commented, quote, "It wasn't much of an airplane, but it made a wonderful boat," unquote. On July 18, 1933, Barr left Atlin for Tulsequah. In the upper reaches of the Taku River, the engine failed. Barr managed a dead stick, that is, without power, landing, in spite of the narrow river. Barr beached the aircraft and set up camp beside it. With steep cliffs on each side of the river, he was unable to walk out. With no radio, he could only wait. Several days later, Eastman flew overhead on his way to Atlin. Seeing Barr's predicament, he continued to Atlin and sent a telegram to Juneau. The telegram was relayed to Strong in Tulsequah. 2 days later, Strong arrived at Barr's camp. After assessing the problems, Strong remarked, quote, "Didn't you have a match?" unquote, in reference to a possible insurance claim. Strong and Barr loaded the Hornet engine aboard the boat and started the difficult journey back to Tulsequah with the aircraft in tow. The engine had to be shipped to Vancouver for overhaul, which would take some time. Strong found a replacement in Whitehorse, a 1928 de Havilland DH-60X Cirrus Moth, a small training airplane capable of carrying its pilot and one passenger. After the expense of overhauling the engine and the limitations of the Cirrus Moth, Strong soon tired of aviation. About 2 years after the river landing, the Fokker crashed and was destroyed at McDames Lake, BC. In December 1937, Strong sold the Cirrus Moth to a Vancouver buyer. Meanwhile, Barr had set up his own airline in Atlin. In 1934, the Northern Canada Air Express, first with a Stinson Model S Junior in 1934, and later, after October 1935, with a Fairchild 100 Pilgrim. The Pilgrim became a frequent visitor to Tulsequah, hauling freight to a mine. Barr left Atlin with his new bride, Mary Kate, in summer 1937, moving first to Juneau, where he flew for Alaska Air Transport, and later to Fairbanks. During 1938 and 39, the mine that Barr had serviced near Tulsequah built its own primitive airstrip. Located at the junction of the Tulsequah River and Wilms Creek, the single gravel runway was initially 2,100 feet by 80 feet. An RCAF wartime navigation document shows it as an emergency field. Limited repairs were available at the mine. Fuel of 73 octane was on hand. During the late 1930s, White Pass Airways of Skagway acquired a 1931 Curtiss-Wright D-3 Kingbird. This aircraft, flown by Carl Bloomquist, made as many as 7 trips a day with supplies from Juneau to the Tulsequah airstrip. Still later, in the early 1940 period, Sheldon Simmons, known as Shell, carried freight and passengers to the mine from Juneau in a Fokker Super Universal, probably belonging to PATCO, the short form of the Panhandle Air Transport Company. After the Second World War, Herman Peterson flew a Northern Airways Avro Anson Mark V on contract for Consolidated Mining and Smelting Company, also known as Cominco, to fly personnel and supplies to Tulsequah. The airstrip had been improved by Cominco to service its mine operations. Peterson Air Services of Atlin had operated a regular service to Tulsequah since 1950. In the late fall of 1959, Peterson had a new Cessna 180 on wheels. The aircraft was called Susie, his wife Doris's nickname. Peterson took the Cessna to the remote mining camp, formerly operated by Cominco. The camp was now closed. Only a caretaker and his family were present. When Peterson arrived overhead the airstrip, he checked the landing area and sensed only a couple of inches of fresh snow. He started his landing. A few feet down the runway, the wheels broke through the crust of the ice below the snow, sending the aircraft over on its back. Peterson's insurance arranged for the aircraft engineer and Whitehorse mayor, Gordon Cameron, to fly to Tulsequah and start the salvage process. The salvage crew and insurance adjusters were housed with the Cominco caretaker in the company house, set well back from the Taku River amid tall timber. When repairs were complete, a Cominco tractor cleared the strip. Susie the Cessna, now on skis, was flown back to Whitehorse by Gordon Cameron, pilot and engineer and mayor. By 1955, the strip was operated by Cominco and had been lengthened and widened to 2,800 feet by 150 feet. By the mid-1960s, there was no further reference to the strip in government publications. The BC Aviation Council Air Facilities Map of 1975 again shows a strip at the site 2,000 feet long. In the early 1950s, the area was mined. No longer economical, mining stopped. But mine drainage resulted in a number of potential contaminants totaling approximately 860,000 liters entering the watershed every day. In 1990, Redford Resources wanted to reopen the mine and built a 100-mile road. The nation's elders fought to stop the road. They went to the Supreme Court. The court backed the nation's right to protect the land. In the 2000s, a land guardian program was established to provide jobs to manage the lands, monitor wildlife, and track the effects of industry on the area. And in 2019, the federal government made an initial investment to protect and conserve the area.